The burden is on us, right? There is a lot of money, there's a lot of gain to be had in the dishonesty business.
Right.
And that's kind of what we're fighting against on a personal level, on a societal level.
And then people on that other side are saying the same thing.
Some of them are willfully dishonest. They're honestly dishonest.
But I mean, let's be honest, right? On both sides, people are saying that. People are dishonest on both sides of things, right? So I think that's one thing that I want to make sure that I'm saying today is that I know that we believe what we believe, right? Sure. All of us do. And we always say that the other person is the one that's the wrong, right? But in different groups, you have people that are doing some wrong things on both sides, right? And I think for me, that was one thing that I had to be honest about and say, okay, there is no black and white with some of this, as far as this person's this group is all right, this group is all wrong, right? Because just as you're saying that, literally, that other side is saying the exact same thing.
That's absolutely true. There's definitely perspective.
Yeah.
There's difference of opinion.
Yeah.
There's not usually difference of fact. There's difference of opinion, difference interpretation.
Yeah.
But there's also people who are honestly dishonest.
Yeah.
And there's a great book, there's a great documentary called Merchants of Doubt. And it's about sources that are used in trials. They write academic papers. They will, for a price, take anything that if you want a paper that says that the Grace A. Dow Memorial Library Auditorium is underwater right now, they'll write that for you. And they'll take that money and they'll put that perception out there.
Yeah.
And that's a dangerous thing. That's a thing that because largely we are honest people, individually and otherwise, it's difficult for us to understand that and to be able to fight back against that.
Yeah.
It's our nature to try to both sides it, try to understand, like, where are you coming from?
People also tell us you can buy a pill and it's going to make you lose weight, right? And somehow we're okay with that dishonesty. We just look at it and we laugh and we say, well, that's not going to work.
Because we may benefit from it.
So why is that okay, right?
Right.
I mean, why do we tolerate that?
Can I say something? We lost piggyback on what Laura was saying, because now I'm excited. Sorry.
I know we all get all like
we're all like leaning forward a little.
But we didn't know what we didn't know in the past. So like historically, we didn't know what we were missing, and we were dependent on individual experiencing and witnessing to know what we were going to learn.
Sure. Yeah.
Now I'm not so sure that we even want to have honesty, because we don't want the experience of critique or criticism. We don't want to do the work to find out what we don't know. And we want to even go a step further and say, no, that didn't happen, and we're not just going to talk about it, and we're going to change everything so we don't have to talk about it. So let's pretend like slavery didn't happen, for example. So, right? So, when we talk about whether or not we're willing to be honest or dishonest and what it looks like, it's almost a matter, too, of whether we want to do the work to know what we don't know so that we can grow into our honest selves, because it is a process. And, like being that 3-year-old to take the cookie off the table, and if we're asked about it, we'll blame it on the dog. Like in our head as a 3-year-old, if that story worked out, good, I was being honest, right? But we wouldn't.
That's self-preservation.
But later on, like, we grow to know because we grow to learn, and we seem to be losing the capacity and the vision for wanting to grow and learn. And to Dave's point, we're also willing to take that opportunity away from other people to further our own objective.
Yeah. So yes, very good points. I really love this dialogue. I want to ask you all something really quickly, and then we're going to start with our audience participation. How does honesty impact? So I want to talk, and this goes about a little bit into what you were talking about. How does honesty really impact your relationships with other people and with yourself, right? Because honesty with yourself is hard. Sometimes it's harder, right? When you start really looking at yourself and seeing who you are, that's difficult sometimes. And sometimes that happens after somebody is honest with you, right? If someone says you are whatever, you may get defensive and angry in that moment, but then you go home and you're like, I am kind of like that. You know what I mean? I mean, I'm sure we've all kind of been there sometimes, maybe where we had to reflect on what someone said. So how does honesty impact the relationships? I mean, I think about people during, especially, 2020, 2021, people were afraid to be honest about what they felt about different things. I mean, the stuff going on right now in the schools, stuff happening all in our nation, that some people will never share what they really feel because the group doesn't feel that way, right? So they're afraid to say they want to vote for Donald Trump, right? I'll just say that, right? Some people may be afraid to say that because they're afraid someone will judge them based on that. So how does honesty impact relationships with others and also with ourselves? How does that work?
I mean, I think one big thing that you've touched on a couple times, and I've thought about it a lot, so with the current system that we have, especially in America with two political parties, is you have to lump something that is a much larger issue than what it really is into two direct sides. And a lot of things don't have a right or a wrong or a direct different side. But because of that, you're put in different situations where if you're a part of this group, I have to believe this. And you kind of sometimes convince yourself to try and believe something that might go against your own personal views. And we're not in our own system right now. Often there's not that individual freedom. We see things as groups, large masses instead of individuals, because we all are individuals. And when you get to know someone on an individual level, you can connect and relate. But when you think of them as part of this larger mass, we see numbers, statistics, we don't see people. Another thing with what you said that I was really thinking about, because my mom actually laughed at me when she heard I was doing a panel about honesty. And so, there's my vulnerability for the day. But what you were thinking...
Lighten up, Mom.
But what you were saying about like never regretting honesty, one of the biggest and scariest things in my life I've ever done was come out to my parents, which was a really sucky 2 years. But it's also something I would never regret because of where we're at now is so much better, and being able to be in that position, even though I went through all this pain, I went through all this crap, but like what you said, in situations where you've chosen to be honest, you usually end up in a place where you're more honest with yourself in situations, which obviously doesn't apply to everything, but in general, because at first I was like, no, that's not true. And then I thought about it more. I thought about my personal experiences, and I was like, okay, I can see that, and I can see how that can be a positive thing. And I don't know if I even answered your question.
That's okay. Let Catherine, did you have something to say really quick, and then we'll...
Sure. I guess I think when we think about relationships and stuff and restoring a culture of respect, someone else brought up the word honor this way earlier, and how honesty is rooted in honor. And if we restore that culture of honor, I think that's a great place to start restoring honesty. And I have this painting I did a long time ago that says, happiness is fleeting, choose joy. And, emotions are so deceptive sometimes. And if I'm listening to myself and saying, well, I feel this way and that's honesty, I have to think there's a higher truth. And I want to make my decisions based on that, on the most honorable, purest intentions that I could possibly act on, and not a fleeting feeling that in 5 minutes may be gone. Yeah. I want to make those hard choices. Yeah.
I think,
wait a minute.
Sorry.
Well, and this is a little bit of a term, but it goes back to relationships. When you invited us to do this, I remember seeing that this was going to be about honesty and transparency. And I think they're really different things, but I think they're kind of married. And so I think when it comes to relationships, I feel like I'm honest with everyone I'm in a relationship with, but I use the transparency slider, right? Like you can on Photoshop, right? Like I'm not going to be as transparent with someone I have just met or someone I don't trust as I'm going to be, say, with my family or with people I love. And so I think they intertwine. This is a two-variable problem, right? And so it's really hard to come up with one answer.
Yeah.
I really wanted to add something to what Kim had to say about this kind of binary. And there seems to be difficulty of escaping this tendency of the world to just want to box us in, right? I had a coming out process too. And one of the challenges of doing that was this fear of all the things that people would associate with me. If you say that you've dated a guy before, you end up constantly having to educate to be like, just because I do that doesn't mean I have to like all these other things.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard to sometimes be authentic when you're just afraid that the world is going to think all of these things about you. And it's true in politics as well. An example of this that came to the fore really recently, there's this song called Rich Men North of Richmond. I don't know if y'all have heard of it. Oliver Anthony. It's a working class perspective, a sort of grievance about kind of the rich upper classes. And it echoes a lot of what people who support Trump might say. And so immediately you have like Vanity Fair, Rolling Stone, like all these news outlets saying, new right-wing anthem just dropped, that it kind of plays with conspiracy theories, which is actually not even close to the truth about how this song has like resonated with people. And even the guy who wrote it was like, the song was brought up at the GOP debate, but I wrote it about the people on that stage, right? And so you have this song that kind of media has chosen, it means a certain thing, even though the songwriter had a totally different intent. And so when it comes to somebody, a person who's enjoying the music, it's like, if I say that I like that song, am I a white supremacist? Am I MAGA? Am I a Nazi? And in reality, like that's not necessarily true.
It's unfair.
What's that?
Yeah, it's unfair.
Yeah, and you have a senator from Connecticut, Chris Murphy, who wrote this on Twitter. Like, actually, a lot of people who like this song were people who voted for Bernie Sanders in the Democratic primary. A lot of these populist economic concerns, and people were like, "Dude, you should retire. Like, what are you thinking?" Kind of taking the media line about the song and making that the truth. So I think it's up to us, all of us, to actually tell authentic stories to kind of break through this tendency of the world to fit us into certain shapes and narratives, because it's not an honest thing that they're doing, but only we can fix that. It's up to us.
Yeah, and I just want to make sure I'm clear that when I said that about people who vote for Trump, it was not a dig towards anybody. It was I'd like to make things clear because people hear things a certain way. That is just a demographic that I talk to that are afraid to talk. Right? Because of fear of judgment. So I wanted to make sure I brought that voice out. When I can't get them here, I will try to speak for them a little bit.
I am by far not one of those folks, but I talk with them almost every day.
I mean, we all do, right? And that's the whole point of this. And I get so excited talking about this because that is the whole point of this, is that we all interact with each other every day, and we don't know what everybody is going through. We don't know what everybody believes, and that's why we can't jump to make assumptions and judgments, because we don't know. And just because somebody likes a certain song doesn't mean that they align with this whole group, right? So Nikita, I want you to share what you're going to share, and then we're going to get to customers to the audience. I'm sorry, our customers. Go ahead.
The piece that for me, that resonates in your question, and I think is missing from how we've been talking about this so far, is emotional intelligence.
Yes.
And our ability as individuals to regulate and be responsible for our own emotional intelligence and grow in that space. Mm-hmm. Because then we're spending less time worrying about what other people might think, say, do. Like unfortunately, we live in a society where we do have to worry about what people might do. But even that is a function of a deficit with emotional intelligence. If you're that individual that something causes you to like turn up that quickly that you just gonna go off, then and at the same time we're in this space right now where we've made emotions a weapon. Right? And something that certain groups of parents believe that they can control, or certain groups of people think they can control. But before we could either talk about being honest in our relationships, we have, and being honest with ourselves, we have to understand our emotional intelligence or lack thereof.
Yes, because if we welcome it, we have to be able to receive it, right? If we say, I want you to be honest with me, then we have to be able to receive what they're saying. We can't try to mold it into what we want, So yes.
One of the things I learned about honesty working with young reporters and
Sure.
also students was when they would put a piece of work in front of you to evaluate
Oh, yeah.
something that
Right.
they probably put their heart and soul into, and now it's your job to tell them everything that's wrong with it. What a horrible job that
Yes.
is,
With that
but a
red
valuable
pen.
one.
Yes.
And then how to deliver that. And it took me a long time to figure out the right balance to give praise, but then give criticism, give instruction, give ideas. I still don't know that I have the hang of it, but I certainly have a lot of appreciation, a lot more of an appreciation for what teachers do on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And that emotional intelligence to know that,
Yes.
I don't remember who said it to me, but a professor friend said, you really have to meet students where they're at, not where you want them to be, not where you expect them to be, but where they're actually at.
Yes.
It requires you to change for them, not them to change for you.
Yes, 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 yes. That is the truth. That's the truth. That is the truth. And when we are aware, self-aware, and we're able to watch others, observe others, we pick up on things. We know some people cannot handle certain things. It's very clear, right? So we do have a responsibility in how we deliver things. We want to get to our audience, the audience. So if you all have, thank you, panelists. I appreciate you all. If we have any questions out there, please stand up. Need the lights.
Well, there's a switch right over there.
Yes, please. I think Jared had to go. The lights.
Oh, appreciate the conversation. I really wanted to say I appreciate what you said about that song and the Bernie voters, because I voted for Bernie in the primary, but I also like that song, aside from maybe one line. But what I really wanted to ask you all is, I have a friend who is really philosophical. I try to subscribe to altruism, right? Try to be a person of integrity. You guys kind of touched on that a lot. Doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do, being virtuous, right? He basically said that there may not be any such thing as true altruism because you're always serving your ego. Even when you think that you're not, you likely are. So I want to know what you all think about that, because my knee-jerk reaction was like, maybe I'm a nihilist now. I don't know. Maybe this doesn't matter, right? So I just wanted to hear what you all thought.
There's a quote I really like from Caitlin Flanagan. She writes for The Atlantic. And she recounts her youth. She would come home from school or work, and she'd tell her dad this thing that she was just so electrically certain was true. Like, she would go off on this. And her dad would pause and listen and be like, well, what's the best argument of the other side? Like, can you articulate that? And sometimes she couldn't. And sometimes she knew the best argument, but that's not the one she wanted to engage with. You know, she wanted to engage with the laziest one or the most problematic one or the most, hyped up one. So I think it's sort of also a selfless thing to do, part of honesty, not just the expression and being honest, but how we see, how we hear. Like, if we were to restate somebody's thoughts, like right back to them, would they recognize them? And I think that is inherently like a selfless part of the honesty, to make sure that they're seen and they're heard. And so that's important too. And I think it kind of gets to like minimizing the ego, minimizing my certainty to get to the point of certainty being the enemy of curiosity, like centering the curiosity.
Also, I think altruism isn't binary, right? And if you think of it as a range, I mean, we all know people that are at the far end of the wonderful side of that range. I mean, Mother Teresa, right? This is who I immediately think of as someone being really altruistic. But just because you aren't that doesn't mean you can't call yourself, right, altruistic. You're just somewhere else on the scale. So I'm not sure that. I think that we don't do ourselves a service at all when we make those things binary.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's almost giving ourselves an excuse to say, well, since I can't be that good at it, I'm just not going to think about the good things I can do at all. That's going to be unfortunate.
Yeah. Yeah.
I heard ego and I shut down because Sigmund Freud came.
Hi, I'm going to fumble through this a little bit because it's a train of thought I'm trying
That's
to
okay.
put into place. But So we talk about honesty and transparency and all the different factors that go into being honest and when to be honest and how are you honest, whether it's with yourself or someone else. And you know, what is our truth may not be the truth, but it's us, right? Which is where the transparency comes in. So you should be able to speak to why you think that's the truth or who you heard that from or where you're getting it from. The issue with being transparent is where this judgment comes in, right? And I saw your believe sign from Ted Lasso in your video.
Oh.
So there's a big thing from Ted Lasso, though, the show, be curious, not judgmental. But we listen to reply, not to understand.
Yeah.
So then where we would hope that our baseline in communication is we all start here in the middle at understanding and compassion and grace, but we don't. So I think as just culturally, we start on the defense, and that's the baseline. So I think when we're talking about being honest and being transparent, that curiosity feels like an attack, right? And so you're going to defend yourself against whatever questions are coming at you, whatever assumptions you're making that you think they're making, the judgment you feel. So right now in this conversation, I feel like a question I would love to hear from you guys is how do we move the baseline from defensiveness individually to this place of safety and openness in the middle where those conversations can happen, those questions can be asked, and that transparency can bloom into understanding, discovering the truth. So how do we move the baseline, right, to get to a place where transparency and honesty is more comfortable, more accepted, and easier to be free with?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, I have an answer to that. Come to the rest of the show. This is the place. Shameless plug. But does anybody want to tap into that?
I feel like it's exactly what you were saying earlier. It's that being okay with not knowing things. I think having a healthy relationship with your doubts, with your struggles, with the things you're not so good at is very important. Like what you were saying with giving critique to young artists. I mean, I was a young artist once, and that's something I'm incredibly grateful for because now I know how to receive critique, how to understand that without immediately getting on emotion. I think emotions are so valid, important, yes. But I think being able to check that rationality element of it first before letting your emotions come into play can really help with that situation of, I love what you said about we listen to reply, not to understand. And I think being able to know that conscientiously going into it and be able to check your emotions at the door and be able to really be okay with not knowing, being okay with disagreeing. And I think that's something that is sometimes hard to achieve when you don't have a strong relationship with the person. When you have a strong relationship with the person, you know that underneath everything, they love you. And so you can be okay disagreeing. You can be okay not understanding and being able to reach that common ground.
And I guess, and Catherine, I want you to go next. And I guess the real thing for me too is that when we talk to people that we don't know, right? That's really where the work is. Like people I know how to talk with them and navigate and, you know, do what I need to do with them. But how do we get to that point with people that we don't know? My aunt, she moved back to Texas recently, but her and I were talking about this, and she said something that was so interesting. She said that we as humans are able to come together when there is some type of threat, right? So we think about, 9/11, we think about, school shootings, whatever it is, right? When we feel like someone is threatening the way we live, our communities, we all come together. We don't care about differences. We don't care about anything because us versus them, right? And she asked the question, she said, because we were talking about this work here, and she said, how do we achieve that minus the threat? How do we just get together? How do we just have that community without the threat? And I was like, yeah, how do we do that?
So I'm jumping in after her.
Yeah, okay. So Laura was whispering something, but I want Catherine to go, then I want you all to go, and then I want some more to go.
So maybe to take that in a whole different direction, just my experience in order for me to not come at things from a place of insecurity, which I think is a root of defensiveness, is that it's my ego. I know the answer and I've got to make sure that's the right answer. For me to drop all that, it starts with, I think, humbly knowing, at least for me, my identity is in Christ, and not to speak for everybody or anything like that, but when I really got to a place of kind of just broken, other stuff stripped away, and let God rebuild me in that place, I could say, okay, so I'm going to stay humble here, and I don't have to have the answers because he does, or it's okay to be a mystery. I can have faith and I can let some things go, but I can listen, I can accept, I can have compassion. My job then is to love, not to be defensive, but to love like he would. And so, and I don't have to worry about if I'm judged. Jesus on earth did not get treated very nicely. At least what history of the Bible tells us about that. So I don't always have to be treated nicely. And I'm not looking, I feel like in many ways strive to be a people pleaser and look for that acceptance. But again, in that place of brokenness and then healing, there was something that just let go of that. And it's okay if I stand alone. If I'm confident that I'm authentically being who God calls me to be, and I'm not worried about, I don't need to judge you or anybody else. If I know that I'm, as to the best of my ability, doing what I can to live that way, then I don't have to worry about how somebody else responds to me, because I only have one person I'm trying to please, and it makes life so much simpler. And then I can say, I'm free to love you and all of you, and it can be that simple sometimes, or at least that was my journey.
That's your perspective. No, I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Conversations are not combat.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, you don't win a conversation. I'm not sure that you lose one. And curiosity, I think you said something about weaponizing curiosity. It's a weird concept to me, because it's kind of the premise of what I do every day. I'm curious about everything. I don't go to church. And growing up here in the city of churches could make you feel pretty outsider a whole lot of the time here. But we're not combatants.
No.
You're cool.
I'm really enjoying the things you're saying. I'm like, this is so much fun.
We're doing fine. I mean, you want to arm wrestle or something?
You want to arm wrestle?
No, let's keep talking.
Yeah, we're good. We're good. So, I mean, I think what you said is true. I think you go into conversations to listen. If you're trying to think three steps ahead, hopefully it's good questions where you can learn more about that person, and you're not doing some sort of like verbal fencing or something like that. But yeah, conversations aren't combat. They're fun.
I just have two really quick things. First of all, I love that your aunt asked that, and the answer is no, we can't. Because that's like a biological response. That the threat is your response to threat. But we're not always that way. I mean, think about when there's a hurricane and everyone runs to the store and buys all the water and nobody else gets it, right? We don't always come together when a bad thing happens. We just biologically protect what's ours. So unfortunately, that's the sad truth. But the other part I was going to say is that's a scientist in you. I'm like, let us hold on to this hope. No, the other thing I was going to say is, I mean, you kind of laughed, right, when you said to her, "Oh, come to the rest of the shows." Yeah. But it's not a joke. Yeah. I mean, there are people in this community, and again, I'm going to sound like a commercial, but I'm going to point out Carrie again. I mean, she's working on programs that she's bringing to organizations to help people do exactly this thing. Right? To have these conversations, to come to that center, to feel safe and recognize that conversations aren't a battle, and that we work best when we trust each other, and transparency is valuable. And I mean, she does great. She's not the only one. There's all kinds of people in our community who are doing that work, and gosh, they are amazing to be with. I mean, they really are. And you just have to seek them out and spend time with them, and it will change your life. It really will. You change people's lives. You do. You do.
Thank you. Real quick, sometimes it is defensiveness, and I wouldn't necessarily use that word, but whatever that vibe is people experience, it could just be that, depending on where you come from. So if the objective is to let's move the conversation forward, but you haven't given people the voice or the opportunity to explain or to share or articulate all of this back here, yeah, I'm a little annoyed, or I'm a little defensive at you moving things forward without hearing me, because how can you better understand without having heard what you need to hear. And for people who frequently live their lives on the margin, that's a real issue, especially when you're part of the dominant community, whatever the dominant community is.
Yeah.
You have the privilege of just saying, let's move this forward. That is a privilege.
Yeah.